Hey everyone, my name is Rahat. I hope you all are doing well. I am the host of the video series Mainframe Voices. As the name suggests, we are creating a video series where we gather different perspectives of experts on mainframe technology and mainframe modernization. Our goal is to highlight the importance and future of mainframe in today's technology landscape. In this episode of Mainframe Voices, we discuss the concepts of data democratization and its potential to unlock the vast amounts of data stored on mainframes. Traditionally, access to this data has been limited, often requiring lengthy process to obtain valuable insights. By democratizing data, companies can empower employees at all levels to access and utilize information directly, leading to more informed decisions and greater agility. Explore how this shift can transform business operations using real world scenarios like a retail company enabling store managers to directly access sales data. Our experts will discuss the benefits of data democratization and how it can drive innovation and efficiency across organizations.
Mainframe data, one of the major differences between open system and mainframe is that the data representation within the computer is different. It is encoded differently in mainframe. So in Windows, you can just copy paste, right? Control C, Control V, you copy paste, you can move the data from one place to another. You can't do that from mainframe to a Windows laptop. If you just copy paste the file, because the encoding is different, the data is going to look different in the Windows operating system. So this causes an issue first. Then the data, it's been captured for a very long. So over the years, the requirement for capturing the data, the schema of the data would have changed within the organization. 5 years ago, the organization would have sold like 500 products. Now they may be selling like 800 products. The requirements for the schema, how the data is stored, would have changed over a period of. And then the number of employees who have the knowledge about this data would have also changed. Today, whoever is working on the application might know about today's system, but if you go and ask them, how was this data used like 20 years ago, they may not know it. So all these things add to the complexity of accessing mainframe data. Now, you use the word democratization. Traditionally, to share mainframe data, people always copy the data. So you take the data from mainframe, format it in a way that an open system would understand, then export the data to an on-prem database or to a cloud database. But that need not be the case anymore. There are ways you can integrate your cloud application to access mainframe data in near real time, or you can replicate the data in near real time. You don't have to wait for the end of the day to process a large volume of data in a batch mode and send it. So today there are options to this data in real time, near real time, or even in batch mode. And organizations should take advantage of that. Because if an organization takes advantage of that, then they could run some workload in cloud, some workload in mainframe, integrate them, and whatever be the business case, they can take advantage of that. And also, offloading data from mainframe at the right time may even save them some costs on mainframe maintenance. So the data democratization going forward is going to be very important. And also, we talked about AI. So, if an organization chooses to do AI outside mainframe, then we need data democratization because we have saved data for a very long time in mainframe. That data that we have locked in mainframe should be exposed to the outside world so that organization can start understanding patterns that exist in the data in the past. Also, some organizations will be able to even monetize the data. Whatever they had saved in the database for a long time, now they can come up with new products and they'll be able to make more money out. Security is a part of the data democratization process. So that's where you are. Think about how to save the data while it is at rest, while it is in transit. Also, you grant access to the right group of people. You don't expose the data to anyone and everyone, and whichever kind of organization you are. So if you are a medical company, you have certain set of rules to be compliant. If you're a bank, a financial institution, you have to be compliant with certain regulatory processes. All those things have to come up when you design the data democratization process. And we have methods available for all of them. You want to integrate with cloud, we have the process available. It's just a matter of identifying your compliance requirements, your security requirements, and keep building it the right level.
I was fortunate to work in a few data-focused programs in my previous consulting roles. The data democratization is a tricky one. I can say that from a technical perspective, fortunately, the technology has evolved to make data that sits on mainframe in a kind of in hierarchical databases and record sets to make it more consumable and exposed in more relational models. So purely from unlocking the data and making data accessible, the technology exists today. Now, challenge is that within organizations, access to data is handled with extreme care because there's regulatory implications if data is misused. There's data protection regulations. That means that data can't be using freely. And the challenge organizations face is giving better access to data within the organization, but still complying with this. I mean, data leakages may have an enormous impact to an organization, both from a regulatory perspective, financial penalties, legal implications for the leadership, but also consumer trust. And that's why I think the data democratization it does require a strategy. I personally believe that data should be easy to access within the organization with the right controls, okay, and with the right protections to make sure that, for example, you don't give access to all the data, you give access to subsets based on people's profiles, based on people's attributes. If I'm a manager, maybe I can get access to sales data from my store, but maybe I don't get access to information about cost management because maybe you want to keep just within the financial department. Things like if I'm working as a data scientist, maybe I don't get access to the true customer data. I mean, the plain data, maybe the names and part of the address and some other information is obfuscated or transformed in a way that cannot be reversed, but is still meaningful and representative. So you can get access to the data patterns, but not the actual granular data. And all these things need to be thought through, and it's actually quite complex. So sometimes organizations end up going to, now it's locked away, it's not easy to access. It's a simpler answer than explaining all these things that you need to think about, and it requires some time and effort and technology, obviously, to implement the right controls.
I think that in data democratization in general is that we are trying to give access to more data to more people. And as you say, a lot of the data is on the mainframe. And as we talked about earlier, there's a strict, secure environment on that mainframe, and that's by design. So one of the challenges of democratizing data is ensuring that we do it in such a way that the data is governed appropriately. So data governance needs to rise up as a more important aspect of every organization. And by governance, I mean, how are we managing it? What is the data? That's the metadata. A lot of organizations don't even have the right metadata for their data. Without understanding the metadata, you don't know what the data is. If you don't know what the data is, you can't paste the rules on it to govern it appropriately. So we have to do that given the compliance that's being enacted in businesses and governments. Things like HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley and GDPR. These are all things that control and tell us what we can and can't do with data. So just giving access to the data isn't going to be sufficient because you can't give access to all of it. So in some cases, there are things you have to do to the data before you give access to it, things like masking. So if I give access to certain parts of data, I don't want to show the social security number, so I have to mask that. So there's tooling you have to put in place before you can even begin to think about democratization of the data. And the things also to keep in mind is that this ideal of democratized data is going to require an ongoing process. It's not just give someone access and away you go. It's, as I mentioned, give someone access with security, but it really boils down to being able to answer and solve what are the most common data challenges that employees face. And one is obviously they don't have the access to the data that they need. Another big problem is that the data is suspect. It's not accurate. So they look at it and they can't really use it. So part of this needs to be, how do we improve the quality of our data, which gets back to data governance. Then maybe they have access, but they don't have the appropriate skills to answer the questions they need to answer, which gets back to the training issue that we discussed. Then maybe they have tools, but they're not designed for standard users. Maybe they were designed for a data scientist or a data specialist. But if we're democratizing data, everyone has to be able to have access to it. So a complex analytical tool isn't going to be the right answer for everybody. And then the other issue is when all of the data experts are too busy to help out. So you have to have a way of making sure that the people who understand the data can help the people who are now trying to access the data. So again, it gets back to culture. A lot of these issues aren't solved just by technology. It's solved by changing the way the business operates. And I would much rather be charged with, oh, here's some technology implemented, than here's the way the business runs, change that. It takes longer to change the way the business runs than it takes to install a piece of technology. So, the end result is really access isn't enough. You have to build that culture and address all those questions and issues that the users have when you democratize.
Data democratization is happening in enterprises. It first means that the enterprises needs to figure out what data they have. That's where most of them fail. So the mainframe is kind of irrelevant to the challenge that most enterprises don't really know well where their data lives, what data they have. Mainframe is no different. There was some estimate that around 70% of data there is kind of a gray data that are useless because we have no idea what they are. But it's not worse than in the rest of the enterprise. It may be even a bit better. Data is the driver that drives the modernization of the mainframe. Like, you have the data there, you have a vast amount of data there, you do process a vast amount of data there. So you want to be able to continue doing this. And at the same time, you want to continue or start, depends on where you are in your journey, to use the data for analytics. Analytics probably is gonna involve some dashboards. It's probably gonna involve some AI somewhere. Most probably it's gonna be still more of a machine learning kind than the large language models, though this may change easily as we are able to integrate the large language models directly with the protocols that we are using to get the data. The data will be most probably structured, like lots of the data or most of the data are in storages like DB2, so SQL-based, relational-based databases. So effectively, it's no difference to non-mainframe environments. It's just about the security aspect here. Like, lots of these data are private. You can't really make sure, you can't get it somewhere where you lose them. Mainframe modernization is important. It's important to make sure that you can use your standard tooling to also access data from mainframe, but also they tend to be among the most risky data to lose. You are heavily balancing between what you expose in order to get benefits with them, with what do you want to keep hidden in order to make it more difficult for attackers to get the data. And anyone who believes that they are not in danger and that nobody is attacking them already lost their data.
Permissions are always important, In mainframe practice in general, you are not allowed to get a lot of permissions. So when you start to create, let's say, an ID in mainframe, there's always a category. Like if you're an operator or a developer, because there are just certain permissions that is given to you, and there would be certain team who will be allowed to do the things that you want to do. And I think it should apply to every part of the company. Of course, I would say that small companies would not do this. Sometimes if it's just a small company, everybody has a permission for everything. But if you're a big company, I think it's one of the best practice to have or to organize your permissions in a way that everybody doesn't have one. I think it's also part of the security training of one security analyst, It should never be like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got my own ideas on data democratization, just based on my experience, not necessarily based on what other people are saying about it right now. Yes, data is power, and I think certainly the large language model, machine learning paradigm has definitely got scope and leverage to use the data that businesses have for well, for better business. So you can use the data you have, if it's analyzed correctly, to generate more revenue, which is what the best use for that is. But the thing I don't like about the term data democratization is that it implies a sharing of data. Now, you have to be careful in what data it is that you share. Obviously, you don't want to break European laws and share data about customers or about people without the people knowing and giving consent. That would just be stupid and illegal. You could share performance data, vendors, in order to improve their products and your system. You wouldn't want necessarily to share your performance data with competitors because they would know what kind of system you're running, and they would be able to possibly have a competitive edge over you. Data is power, and yes, most of it does live on the mainframe. You just have to be pragmatic. You just have to be sensible and use the data within silos, within businesses, within business units, definitely, to increase your revenue. Use something like large language models internally, so long as it doesn't share with the outside world, because your data is your crown jewels. Open that up, and anybody can get their hands on it, and it's just curtains for you and your business. So I'm just very reticent personally about the use of data democratization until it could be.
In one view, it's a misperception the data is locked away. The concept that just because it's on Z means it's not accessible is not true. Sitting in DB2Z, you can get at it with JDBC. You can get at it with numbers of methods. There are tools that let you get at the data. So the perception that it's locked away. Now it is secure. And that is one thing that is different. Many times your Z data is more locked away because it's secure and we don't want everybody accessing everything. But because you can expose data via APIs, because you can do virtualization systems using virtualization manager, etc., you can make it so that people can see what they should be able to see, get access to the data that help them make decisions without exposing data they shouldn't be able to see. And so we still want to make sure we're not removing our security. We don't want to expose PII. We don't want to, that sales manager, that local sales store doesn't need to know people's credit card numbers or, people. It needs to know my sales numbers. And so doing indexes, building APIs, making it easy for them to get the data that they want. And the ability to create APIs has been simplified so that it's much easier to get at the data over the last X number of years. And so the other problem we have with this data access, though, is, again, people and processes. So what's the process to get access to the data? Probably 1,000 forms and finding the right person and whatever. So we need to simplify the process. And by going to DevOps practices and having one way of doing DevOps pipelines, you can actually expose data in an easier way, because you're not saying you have to come into this mainframe world to get it to the mainframe data. You can have your distributed container that you've built access the Z data, and it can be deployed in a secure way so that it's safe, and you can get the data in a consistent way. And so by standardizing the processes, making them consistent across all platforms, we actually make the data more accessible while still keeping it secure.
I have to say, you have distributed data everywhere in the world today, and you have to bring unstructured data to structured data equal. We are using it already in databases. If you have got that structured, you can use Kafka and something like that for forwarding data to the correct directions and to the correct systems, so that the data can be reused also in AWS, an example, or by different systems on the mainframe. So you can forward it from Linux systems to COS and something like that, and therefore you can distribute the data then.